Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural fantasy and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Ishura Season 2, Episode 8. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're picking up in the aftermath of last episode. We kind of get a slight proper introduction to Yukiharu, and he's talking to someone that it sounds like the voice is coming from like the box or container, whatever it is that's on his back, because the voice is muffled. But essentially, it seems like he went in that direction because he was trying to talk to Neff. But after everything that went down, it's like, well, that's kind of a no-go. And the voice is like, well, you could always go see the other survivor of the first party, Ramzo. And he's like, nah, Ramzo's probably not a good fit either. So he's kind of like, I guess he's researching stuff about the true Demon King or whatever. I guess he wanted to pick their brains about it. I mean, maybe he's just someone like my last episode. Like I talked about it because he's in the intro and he has a camera. So I was like wondering if he was going to be kind of like this chronicler of everything that's going on. I don't know if that's what he's aiming to, because he's the one that was, waxing so poetically last episode about like, oh yeah, like libraries and the knowledge and the woman who read the books and became a noble and stuff like that. So I was curious, like, is he just a collector of knowledge, what this whole thing is, and who's this voice? Is it actually connected to the fact is that the intro has him using a camera makes me feel like that is significant. Now whether the camera does what I theorized and thought about last episode, there's nothing that says like the camera works the way I said it did. I was wondering if like it's connected, like, once again, the examples I use is like speed graph, or like can it be used to like fight or whatever the case may be, because it might be a living entity or something, I don't know. But maybe the camera's just a camera, maybe the box on his back is what's the significant thing, I don't know. But we don't really get to know much about him, only knowing that it's like the voice was like, well, you could always go to the place that, well, I think they were having a discussion about going to the place where it's believed that the true Demon King died. If I'm not mistaken, the village where Uhak's story is taking place is apparently nearby, and maybe that's why things pop off the way it does, but we'll get to that later. So that's interesting, and I think it's interesting because she's like, oh, you're like so much of a wuss sometimes, Yukiharu, but she's like, despite all that, you never really let anything stop you, do you? And he was like, no. So I'm interested to see where that story goes. Once again, we only catch up with him that little bit, but like, I don't know if he still plans on going in that direction of where the true Demon King possibly died. I don't know. But yeah, we catch up. We start in that village and we meet an oracle, Kunodi, and for her, it's like we kind of spread the word of like our word arts is mainly exist like as a blessing of like, right, the word maker gave us language, and we kind of use this power that was bestowed upon us with words to heal those who might be panicked or fearful, to kind of alleviate some of that. And for her, it's like, I can't really do anything beyond that, but I could go out with the hunting party and alleviate some of that stress, because they're dealing with an ogre that's out there, which as a child she remembers coming across ogres. They are scary, they eat minions and stuff like that. So it's like, being kind of on their food, being on the lower end of the totem pole when it comes to like, you technically act as their food. It's understandable why you'd be fearful. She has trauma associated with seeing how scary they can be. But they come across a ogre who's not eating a rabbit, not eating a human, even though it was like, well, humans are their number one meal. He's eating like fruit. And she's talking to him, but he can't understand her. And at first she's thinking he's deaf. I was almost wondering, was it almost going to be like a Helen Keller situation? Because he seems to be, I mean, I didn't know if like his eyes are naturally supposed to be like that because they look, the way they were. I was like, is it supposed to be he's blind too? But it's like, no, initially it's just kind of like he's deaf and he doesn't talk. But then it's later on that Kunodi kind of thinks like, oh, it's not that you can't hear, it's just you can't understand us, because like the word arts are kind of lost on you because you were never taught these words. Like they mean nothing to you, so they can't reach you, because how can you process and understand anything? It all sounds like nothing to you because you don't like, you have no frame of reference or understanding to understand it. So Kunodi is teaching him. She brought him into the village because she's like, he's not what we think ogres are to be. And I think she kind of looked at it as like, I found you and saw you, and so I see the kindness in your heart. And the village is trepidatious at first, obviously, but as time goes on, like, he proves himself. He helps out around the village. The kids like being around him. Kunodi, for her, it's almost like having another son around. Because at first, when she was thinking back to the kids and there were some names mentioned, and she got to Kuze, I was like, Kuze? I was like, isn't that wandering priest dude from last season? I didn't get a chance to look it up because obviously he pops up later on in the episode. I was like, oh yeah, that answers my question. But I was like, I thought that was the dude. But I couldn't remember, like, one of the characters is Neff. We find out about him. But the other two, one was like Aina, and I think the other was like Rivi. And I was like, are we supposed to know what happened to them? Or is it supposed to be like a Neff thing where it's like, you'll find out later. But like, because of like the Aina person, I'm like, didn't she die last season? Wasn't she part of Kuze's story and die? I don't remember. It felt like when I look at her and had that light pinkish purple hair, that kind of lavender hair, I'm like, it seems familiar. And especially the name Aina, it seemed like it might be familiar, but I might be conflating and confusing her with a different character. But I'm like, I don't know if those two characters are dead or not. They might already be dead. Like, they might have died last season. I just don't remember. But yeah, like her being like, oh, Kuze was one of her kids. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Makes a lot of sense, her being a religious person. Because the religious order, like, kind of means, like, I think it's a dying thing where it's like, there are those who are old and it's a lot. Like, I think Kuze is kind of is the younger generation that follows in a belief that's kind of been cast aside, especially by Eurasia. I guess it's almost a thing of religion like that has kind of lost its meaning. Because even Kunodi had talked about how, like, word arts, what they originally came into being, but eventually they got turned into tools of war, and they've kind of been like that since. So what she represents as, like, someone carrying on, like, the religious world maker's words and, like, coming at it from an oracle perspective, like, a lot of, like, what the word arts were about initially has been lost, and they're one of the few remnants of the old religion that are still around, keeping it in that same vein. And she's kind of passing a lot of those teachings on to Uhak. And I thought it was interesting where, like, when he brought the wolf to her, what did she do? She bashed his head in with a rock. I was like, Jesus. I was like, do you not realize how effed up that is? It's like, at first I was like, oh, that might be the dire turning point. Because he hasn't killed anyone or anything. Even she acknowledged, like, even when we are sitting here in front of him eating meat, he never did. He always ate, like, berries and like whatever he found in the woods. Like, it's never anything meat related. So they're just thinking, oh, he's an ogre that just is incapable of eating people, yada yada yada. That's why he doesn't eat meat. He's just eating berries and stuff. But in the long run, we find out it's just a choice that he made. But at first I was like, yeah, like, killing that wolf kind of seemed like, it's like, what's the point of that? Like, because you killing that wolf is no different from you bringing in, I guess for her, it's like she saw the difference between Uhak and the wolf. The wolf, it's like, yeah, you're a cold, like, you're a young thing, but it's like, I know what your instincts are. Because she even says, like, when she looked at the wolf, she's like, I saw it as kind of like you and Uhak, you and the wolf. Like, when I initially thought of ogres and a wolf, like, I think of these beings with no heart. And so she's like, oh, I better kill this thing before it becomes an issue. Because for one, it's going to be a thing that people are always going to be fearful of, which is interesting considering Uhak was someone that they were fearful of, but you gave him a chance. So why didn't you give this wolf? I guess it's like, in her mind, it's like, well, Uhak is different. Whereas this wolf, it's in its instincts and its nature to be this ferocious beast. So we have to kill it, before it grows up or attracts more. Like, it's too much of a threat that needs to be neutralized now. But I was like, that's so interesting, because you would think as a holy woman that you'd be kind of going for the non-violent route like you did with Uhak. But once again, it's like, our job isn't necessarily to go non-violent. It's just to ease people's heart, and killing this thing would ease people's heart because they wouldn't have to worry about it. So it seems hypocritical to me, and I think that's kind of supposed to be the point maybe in the long run. But later on, stuff pops off where it's, what was the larger woman later? Was it like Biaka or something like that? She kind of went on a rampage because, and Kunodi had noted this, it's like, basically when the true Demon King was kind of running rampant, it's like nearby places were kind of driven insane, the animals and people, and that happened with this woman. She starts slaughtering in this village. She ate that one dude, and it was like, oh, that's rough. And so it ends up being like a clashing of word arts between her and Kanodi until Uhak got in the middle and he neutralized it because word arts fall silent on him. So like I guess it's because he can't understand it. He almost has his, and they kind of say it like he basically imposes his will on reality and shifts it to be that. So because those words mean nothing to him, like it can't have any effect. So when she tries to use it, and I guess like maybe it pushed back onto her because like her knees crumpled and so did her arms. So I guess it was kind of like he kind of basically had, if you go by like JRPG standards or just RPG standards in general, but I use JRPGs for example of like, oh, you know, the reflect spell, it reflects magic back at you. I wonder if that was what that was. Like the word arts kind of got turned against her because it kind of bounced off of him. Or was that just kind of an element of he can't understand word arts, but he kind of reflected them back at her in a different manner, not a one-to-one reflection of what she was casting was getting casted. I don't know. But then he proceeds to put her down just like Kanodi did the wolf. And it is a thing of he immediately starts eating her brains afterwards. And then for Kanodi, it's like, oh, well, it's not that he can't eat humans. He just chose not to. And it becomes this interesting situation where it's kind of very much like the approach like indigenous people had, like, you know, years and years and years ago. I mean, I think the belief is still there, even present day with indigenous people, of just the notion of you utilizing everything that you, I mean, it's a different philosophy, but it's in a similar vein of philosophy where it's like when you kill something, you make use of everything. That's how you honor the thing that you killed. You know, it's like, right, I survived because I'm feeding off your sustenance, but the way to honor the spirit of the animal or whatever I'm killing is to not only consume it, but also make use of everything. Never let anything go to waste. Letting the kill go to waste is more disrespectful than just killing the thing in the first place. So that's kind of where Uhak is coming from, where it's like to kind of pay penance for everything that he's done. Like it's like I have to eat you just because it's like I have to. This is almost like my way of paying penance of like I'm bringing in a part of you with me and kind of carrying you with me as a reminder of what I've done. And it's my way to not let, to bring meaning to it and make it so that this death wasn't just for nothing, like that something can be pulled from it. Yes, he's saving lives, but he also sustaining himself in the process, which that whole situation was the catalyst that she was hearing the voices, and now everyone in the village is starting to hear the voices, and they're getting paranoid, turning against each other, turning against Kanodi, turning against Uhak. I mean, they were already kind of nervous, and I think it's a culmination of everything that kind of led to, you know, the human, you know, losing their minds. And I guess you could almost look at it like when it's just, that's the point of like fear. Like you're not always driven by rational thought. Like that fear, it compiles and it consumes, and eventually it erodes your mind so that you're just driven by paranoia and fear, and you don't think about things clearly. And so it's like, right, like, you know, you just turn against neighbor, even though they all were a cohesive village, but it's like that fear. It almost like when she attacked and died, it spread the fear like a virus amongst everyone, and they turned against each other. Uhak then proceeded to slaughter people, and he made sure to eat them. But Kanodi says later on he would also build graves for people as well. As I don't know if those were like people he didn't eat. I mean, I don't know if those are graves he built afterwards. I think those are probably just graves he built in general, maybe for people that died while he was there. Not by his hand, but just in general, like in the past, like while he was here in the village, that people died, he built graves for them type of thing. But Kanodi goes out in the woods and gets attacked because she falls into a trap, gets shot by an arrow, and is in the process of dying. But lo and behold, who shows up? One of her former students, Kuze. And she basically passes on a message to Uhak, where she's just kind of like, she's like, basically forget my studies, because for her, it's like, I was so busy trying to push my beliefs and everything on you that I didn't recognize you operate on your own way and your own scale. Like you do what you believe is right. And for her, it's like, you do that. You don't worry about the teachings I try to pass on to you, because they fall short, because they don't mean anything to you. Because despite everything I've tried to pass on to you, you continue, have been and always continue to just be you and operate with your own beliefs and move about the world how you see it, not just kind of in my perspective. Because it is kind of like she had this very, that even her, like, she grew up with this very, once again, narrow view of kind of seeing like I said, the wolf and Uhak as people who have no hearts, and realizing that, oh yeah, like that notion has carried over into my old age. When you're older, you're kind of stuck in your beliefs. There's not as much room for change. And for her, it's just kind of like, yeah, even when I'm gone, consume my body, which he never did. He left her in a casket. He never ate her. So I think that kind of speaks volumes of, like, despite being silent, like, her presence and everything did matter to him. Spending time with her did matter because these were experiences that have changed him. So despite her saying forget everything, I think a lot of this he does carry with him, and he just amalgamates it with what he already believes and how he operates. Because I think a lot of how he operates is informed by what he learned from Kenobi, and like what he agrees with, what he doesn't, his way to apply what she did and what he witnessed and what she said. I mean, even if he might not be able to understand it, as they say, actions speak louder than words. So I might not be able to comprehend it in the words that you want to say, but I comprehend it through my own language, through my own sight of understanding your actions and how it lines up with, okay, this is how you acted in this moment. I'm in a similar situation. I should act the same way. Like when he killed that woman and, ate her brains afterward. But Kuze wasn't the only former student that ends up showing up. Neff shows up as well. We find out he's actually, the 16th general in Eurasia, which he kind of says like, oh, well, kind of crazy lady staying here. Like, because Kuze comes from the perspective of, I always manage to show up too late, which, is understandable, where shit always sadly ends tragically, and especially with people he cares about and wants to try and do right by. For him, it's like, I always show up too late, to do anything. But Neff is kind of like, yeah, she was crazy. Once again, kind of like still believing in this religious bullshit, which it is. And for him, it's like staying in his village. He's like, even if we arrived sooner to help, they never would have helped us because I would have always been one of them. I don't know if it's like I would have been like viewed as an outsider, or I would have been viewed the same way as Uhak or Kenobi. Like I would have been viewed as kind of like as other in that situation, so there was no saving it. I guess that's kind of implying like maybe all the villagers died. There were kids too, so maybe but by the time like Neff and them got there, like you're able to rein it in. But like those who really went crazy are dead. I don't know if that means like the entire village is dead. I think everyone that stayed inside, but those who were outside were like popping off because they were crazy. So all the crazy people are dead. So, but yeah, Neff is trying to convince Uhak like, oh, do you want to come be a hero? Obviously trying to, I guess, be the representative for Uhak in the coming tournament. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where that storyline ends up going. Because, I mean, we saw these two interact, but obviously, like, the note from Kenobi got sent to him, so I don't know if Kuze gave it to Neff and Neff gave it to Uhak, or whether Kuze met him directly, because Neff was making the whole point of like, oh, you're technically my little brother, Uhak, let's kind of do this. So the fact is we didn't see him and Kuze interact, I think was interesting, but that might have happened off screen. We'll have to wait to see and catch up with these characters to see whether that ends up being the case or not. But I'm very, very interested to see where the next episode takes us, who the next character is that we get introduced to. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.